It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Quark is being read the riot act. It's a fair cop, too, as he's fiddled with the station's phones, so the majority of them play an advert for his bar. He's also somehow managed to tamper with the Defiant's replicators, so I guess Eddington really was keeping it secure before he buggered off to the marquee, at least when he wasn't letting his mates nick it anyway. Right, that's enough introduction, so let's get on with the main plot. Today it's a trip through the wormhole in a megashuttle for planetary scans, or would have been had they not detected a distress call from a different planet on the way there. We arrive and teleport down to discover a settlement that's clearly seen better days, but isn't currently under attack like the distress call told us it was. One of the people who live in the ruins approaches us for help, which is fair considering she looks a touch under the weather. She asks to be taken to someone called Trevian at their hospital, so Dax goes off to try and find it while Bashir treats her. Another stranger joins Bashir and, realizing we're not from around here, explains that she's undergoing something called the QUICKENING and we should bugger off while we still got the chance. No time for that though, as Dax is back and she's arranged transport for our patient. The hospital isn't quite up to Federation standards, but at least it's calm and clean, and there's music too. Our patient is taken from us and carried away, and Trevian himself pops out. Unfortunately, she was too far gone to be helped, but then helped is a relative term for the blight, their name for the condition they have, as it carries a 100% mortality rate. It's carried that rate for the last 200 years, back from when the Dominion decided to make an example of them for resisting. They gave his world a kicking, and then left them with the blight as a way of warning others what happens if you piss off the founders. Everybody's born with the blight, and when it quickens and turns red, everybody dies from it. Slowly, painfully. That's why Trevian tends to them the only way he can, by giving them a place to experience one calm and peaceful day, followed by a swift death through his poisons. Dax has found the system sending out a distress signal, one that's been running for the last 200 years from what she can tell. Perhaps the Dominion left it that way as part of the warning. Bashir thinks there's nothing left to do here and is about to leave when they're approached by a woman we saw in the hospital. She heard Bashir was a doctor and thought he was worth a shot, something perhaps influenced by her being pregnant. Her name's Ikoria, and she knows some others who'd be willing to let him try and help as well, which means hanging around for a while. Up to the megashuttle we go for a chat. Some Jem'Hadar ships are knocking about, meaning it would be unwise to stay in orbit, so we send Kira off to hide in some space fog and tell her to pop back in a week to either see how we're doing or leave flowers at our graves. Ikoria has a little place for us to set up a clinic at least, so Bashir and Dax get to work. Finding the virus itself doesn't take long, but that's just half the problem. Bashir also needs to see how it progresses, which means studying someone who's already quickened, and that's an unappealing prospect for those with not much time left. Most think he's on the make, other hucksters having tried to prey on these people before, but Bashir fixing a kid's broken arm seems to change some opinions. Not all, though, and Trevian sticks his oar in, whilst also letting Bashir know those hucksters who came here before did not live to enjoy the fruits of their deception. The problem, thinks Ikoria, is that people have started to look forward to death. A single glorious day and a swift end is easier than continuing the life they have, an opinion she used to share before becoming pregnant. Others are coming around too, though, including the guy who assumed Bashir was a conman and who told him he should bugger off when we first arrived. It's some time later when Bashir has a concoction to test. The guy from earlier isn't doing so well, Federation pain relief no longer working on him, but Bashir's still hopeful. He thinks his concoction may be a cure, though hasn't told Ikoria that's what she's giving people. He's taking a break when she comes to him to say Dax has detected an improvement. A chat about his childhood and his first patient, a stuffed toy, is interrupted by Dax. Things have gone distinctly downhill. A test to see why gives us the answer, just not in the way Bashir expected. Electromagnetic radiation from the equipment we're using is promoting mutation of the virus, a particularly clever piece of engineering by the Dominion. The higher your tech level, the harder it is to cure. They rush to shut everything down, but it's too late for the guy from earlier. Trevian arrives as others are starting to call out in agony, and they each latch onto the solution they know by calling for him. Bashir's clinic is now a morgue. He's berating himself for not seeing it earlier, clues in previous scans that he feels he'd failed to identify. And the worst part is, he was so sure he could cure it in just a week, he was already prepared to nonchalantly gloat about it to Kira when she came back. Dax gently chides him for his arrogance again by saying that just because he didn't find the solution doesn't mean there isn't one. He's taking a walk through the streets and avoiding the judgmental gaze of the locals when Ikoria finds him. She's quickened, but thanks him for giving her hope, if only for a while. The kindness is enough to jar him out of his rut and make him decide to stick around. Kira says he can call the station to come and pick him up when he's ready, hopefully without attracting attention, and he returns to the surface with supplies. They're of the distinctly old-fashioned variety, a back-to-basics approach to prevent provoking the virus. Even with this tech, the results aren't good. The potential cure he gave to Ikoria is entirely absent from her blood now, and the pain is getting worse. He does what he can with low-tech means, a salve to soothe the lesions being about the extent of his abilities. It's a race against time now, and he tells her he'll be able to hurry the baby along in a couple of weeks if necessary. All she has to do is make it that far. A visit from Trevian puts a question mark over her continued existence, but she declines his offer to end things for her and her baby. She also defends his actions to Bashir after he's left. It's some time later, and Ikoria is in labour. A somewhat sanitised version of grunting and straining results in a sprog popping out, and one carrying a surprise. Bashir's potential cure had been absorbed by the child while he was developing, which is why he's free of the blight. Ikoria gets the chance to see her new, healthy son before she carks it. Suffice to say, the news of a healthy child is well received. Even the fact that it's not a cure for everybody, but rather a vaccine for the fetus, doesn't dull their enthusiasm. It'll be a tough job getting a dose to every pregnant woman on the planet, but the stuff is easy enough to make, and Trevian volunteers for the honour. Based on the public's reaction in what amounts to their town square, he won't struggle to find help. Not that Bashir's giving up, though. He's back on Deep Space Nine and fiddling with computer simulations when Cisco arrives to congratulate him on a job well done. It's only half a job as far as Bashir's concerned, so we'll leave him to work on finding a cure for everybody else, until the next adventure. Back in the before times, when this channel was new and still evolving, we looked at an episode of Voyager from Season 2 called Twisted. I commented, briefly as that was my approach at the time, that the episode appealed to me because, despite their best efforts, the crew lost. A wibbly-slash-swirly engulfed the ship, and no matter what anybody did, they couldn't prevent it. Had I been doing these post-mortem analyses back then, I'd have said what I thought at the time, that it reminded me of this episode of Deep Space Nine. We're so used to our cast being indomitable heroes, whether it's taking on 100 murder lizards and winning with only a couple of scratches, or pulling a method of time travel right out of their arse, or dealing with the manifestations of their fantasies, Starfleet gets the job done. It's a rare treat, then, to see Starfleet brought low, a time when the best of the best of the best just weren't good enough. It's unrealistic to expect victory every time, which is why the inverse is also true. Defeat makes things more real. It certainly does for Bashir here. This episode, more than any other, exemplifies who he is, the arrogance and egotism of him, but also his understanding of those parts of himself, his open admission that this is who he is. It'll be another season before we can talk about just why those skills might matter so much to him, as well as theorize that him playing them down may be more than just false humility. For now, though, we can simply say that he's a man who's so used to excelling that he built his entire personality around it. He spent so long being the smartest person in the room that it became an immutable fact in his eyes, and the prospect of somebody knowing more in his chosen area had simply not occurred to him. It resulted in such a level of hubris that, despite knowing the Founders genetically engineer species for a giggle, he still believed he could outperform their biological efforts in less than a week. The experience of failure here humbles him, and that's precisely what he's needed for nearly 4 years now. To be clear, that's not a point I make out of spite, some desire to wipe the smugness off his face, but rather the need to show him as mortal. Being brought low makes him a more believable, more relatable, and more well-rounded character. There is one issue I have with the episode, though. Why are we the first to find this distress call? I'm not talking about Gamma Quadrant species, as it's a fair bet plenty of them knew. That was the whole point of the Dominion doing it, after all. I'm saying that if we have maps of the area containing enough data to show the Dominion border and have the names of the star systems contained within, then why was the distress call, something we've established has been running continuously, a surprise? I guess you could say we were given the map data by another species that's gone through the wormhole, some sort of cartography agreement making sense in exchange for access, but most of those species would have let us know what else they found. That leaves groups like the Romulans, Cardigans, or Klingons, but if they were going to keep quiet about what they found to potentially weaponize it in the future, they'd probably have given us false map data too, so we'd have no reason to go over there ourselves. They could have been sold to us by a Gamma Quadrant species, I suppose, but what reason would they have to only give us partial data? Dealing with us is already verboten by the Dominion, so there's no reason for anybody who's already doing it to hold back, especially as it's something the Dominion wanted to be well known in the first place. That would just piss off the Dominion twice and undermine our trust in the process. As things stand, we're left with Schrödinger's map, something that both has detailed knowledge of the area, whilst also ignoring its most notable feature. The idea doesn't really work. It does give us some points of data to theorize on, though, so let's end with those. The first is that the Dominion is at least 200 years old. Uncle Wayoon the Creepy told us it was 2000 in the last episode, but he's a lying bastard, so we'll take that with a pinch of salt. This, on the other hand, is tangible evidence. The second is circumstantial evidence that the Dominion's expansion may not be a swift thing. This is a planet they clusterfucked 200 years ago, yet we're told it's still outside of their territory. That either means the Dominion was smaller before and decided to make an example of somebody far away from what was then their borders, which doesn't really make a lot of sense as a warning, or that border hasn't moved significantly for the better part of 2 centuries. The latter explanation makes far more sense to me, as we already know the Founders' plan in terms of millennia. Odo was sent out by them centuries ago, and not expected to get back home for a few centuries more, so they're clearly not in any sort of rush. The third point, which ties into that border, lays to rest something that's been festering for a while now. It was implied at the arse end of Season 2 that the Dominion lays claim to everything on the other side of the wormhole. If true, that would have meant any ship we sent through was invading their territory, and technically a Prime Directive violation as a result. The show has now given us evidence that this is not the case, and covered Starfleet's arse by suggesting we've known it for a while. It's an incidental line, and probably one that's just there to pad out the background so the Jem'Hadar patrol makes sense, but it clears up a long-running bugbear of mine, and for that alone, whoever wrote it deserves some points. End of episode.
Okay, so we've eliminated Delia Smith, Magic the Gathering, Beyblades, Nightmare, Sabrina.
To be fair, the title said you're a teenage witch. Don't blame me for false advertising.
Penn and Teller, The Witcher, It's a Kind of Magic by Queen, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
I still think there's something dodgy about that bugger. 5 oranges? That's not natural.
My point is that we've given the idea a thorough testing and we've come up empty. 20th century media doesn't have real magic hidden in it, so we're going to have to think of another solution.
Why can't you think of something? You're the one with a reference database that should go up to the year 2371.
I told you the database was corrupted. At the moment I can only pull information from up to the early 21st century, somewhere around 2025 to be exact. Anything after that is currently unavailable except for very specific historical events of note.
That sounds like an entirely reasonable explanation to me. It does leave us with a bit of a puzzler for how to get out of here though, doesn't it?
Yes, but we're coming up to the end of the season and that's when these things tend to work themselves out. I'd suggest just waiting till then and seeing what happens.
Fair enough. Shall we watch another season of Nightmare while we wait?
Sigh, if you insist. Woof.